I have the honor and privilege to be last with 7 words. Advantage is I wasn't the first one, like June, but the disadvantage is get a lot nervous as 6 people go in front of me. But it goes way out well because we're here in front of friends and fellow believers. So the last saying of Jesus is in Luke 23, verse 46. When Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. We must note before that two verses before that, 2 important events happened in verse 44 and 45. It said, "Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the earth until the 9th hour. Then the sun darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. So from 12 noon to 3 p.m., a darkness fell on the land, and it lasted for 3 hours. Before the darkness lifted, the curtain of the temple was torn in two." Matthew 27, verse 51 kind of explained it in better detail by saying that the curtain was torn from top to bottom. It's a description that defies convention because it would be easier for natural forces to tear a curtain from bottom to top. This act suggests a supernatural act. But it was a temporary and a brief act for Jesus because this was the final moment in his life. And because the greater meaning of what Jesus says becomes clear from the scriptures that magnify the last words. And they come from the first part of Psalms 31:5, which was, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." It's a prayer all Jewish mothers taught their children. Only the word Father was added. By addressing God as Father, he had shown obedience to his will, and these final words was the fulfillment of his purpose on earth. The term reunion is referred to the passage between Jesus and when Jesus was finally able to be one and reunited with the Heavenly Father. But the message of the cross was the obedient Son fulfilling the will of the Father. Jesus repeatedly tells us he did nothing except in the Father's will. "I can of myself do nothing," Jesus said. "As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of my Father, who sent me." He says the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do, for whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner. And to be in God's hand was probably the most comforting thing that Jesus was experiencing that day, because after the agony, the unspeakable pain that he suffered at the hands of the sadistic Romans, it was probably pure joy for Jesus. The blessed warmth and peace of being in God's hands erased the pain and humiliation that he just went through. But most importantly, we have to realize that Jesus died without the fear of death. All men probably go through life waiting for the inevitable shoe to drop. All of us, one time or another, fear the unknown and despair of death. And I've felt that unknown and despair of death. It was during Desert Storm, February 20, 1991. 4 days before the ground war started, my unit was sent into Iraq, to 20 kilometers inside Iraq, to test the enemy defenses of the Iraqis to see what they got. So I was a heavy mortar platoon leader at that time, in front of the leading element of Bradley's. And we went 20 kilometers into Iraqi territory. We passed minefields, and we came upon this rise, and there was barbed wire out there. The scouts went out to check out what was going on. Everybody was really tense and nervous that day, and you can tell, nobody was cocky because it was really an unknown thing for us. The first thing that happened was 7 Iraqis surrendered immediately from the trenches. And the scouts went out there and picked them up. We captured the Iraqis, we put them on the vehicles, and then we sent them back. But almost immediately, everything just went crazy. The Iraqis started shooting at us, started mortaring us, and in that moment, I can remember that, your mouth is so dry, your throat, your heart is in your throat, and all you can see are like bullets, bullets, but you can see the sand kicking in front of you, and explosions to the left and to the right. And it was a funny moment one time, because I looked at Sergeant Schmueller, and he looked at me, and we see the bullets kicking in front right there. And I looked at Sergeant Schmueller and says, "Are they shooting at us?" And then he looked at me, and as soon as I said it, an explosion went off to the left, and we both jumped back into our vehicle so fast that it was funny at that time. You gotta remember, but it was still scary. And that moment in time, you realize that you don't have control of the situation, that the fear of death is so close by, because during that combat operation, we lost 3 people. You see the bodies being pulled out, and you see the Bradleys being hit by rocket-propelled grenades, and it was so unreal that you kind of look at it back and say, "Wow, did I really go through that?" But I felt that real fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear, the despair that any moment now you're going to die. So that was a fear that all men, I think, came over. It came over me, because it was that no longer was I able to be controlling that situation. You can't control the situation, because it's so random how somebody gets hit, how somebody gets wounded, how somebody gets blown up. It's just so random. And at that time, the fear was so great. But for Jesus, though, he was in control of his destiny. He was in control of the moments and the events that were to come. For Jesus, it said to John in John 10:17-18, "Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it again. This command I have received from my Father." And that control was total, because when I was reading it, the manner of his death was meant to be long and excruciating. Of all the punishment in the Roman Empire, crucifixion was the worst. If you did a poll back in those days, beheading would probably be number 1. I'd like to be beheaded. Instead of crucifixion would be number 10. So 10 out of 10 punishments. Because crucifixion was meant to last a long, long time. Usually your legs are broken, your limbs are broken, and you're left up there on a cross to die in agony for days and days and days and days. Okay, you just stay up there. And the condemned, they're supposed to have extreme pain. But for Jesus, also for the other thief. Remember, we had 2 thieves right next to Jesus. Okay, the one thief he took with him, but you never heard about the other thief, right? Because he was still up there. He was still dying, and he was probably still up there at the 3rd day. So that's the kind of punishment and the kind of pain and excruciating manner that he was supposed to live through. But Jesus instead did what he wanted to do. He chose his own time. Life could not fail, nor death could hold power over him until he gave his own deliberate consent. And in the end, he returned to the Father who sent him. "I came from the Father and have come into the world again. I am leaving the world and going to the Father." The gospel each reminds us that the death of Jesus was the victorious death, and that Jesus died the only kind of death that was able to satisfy the justice of God and to save all men.